We begin with a bombshell late this afternoon from D.C. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein slamming a report from the New York Times that said he discussed wearing a wire to record conversations with President Trump, and additionally to recruit cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Rosenstein releasing a statement in part reading, "The New York Times story is inaccurate and factually incorrect. Let me be clear about this. Based on my personal dealings with the president, there's no basis to invoke the 25th Amendment." Now, according to the Times, the allegations are outlined in memos authored by former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Here now to discuss this real deep situation, Madison Jessiato, advisor for the National Diversity Coalition for Trump, Danielle McLaughlin, liberal commentator. Jenna Ellis is back with us, constitutional law attorney, and also Fox News contributor DeRoy Murdoch. He's also with the National Review. He's a contributing editor there. DeRoy, let me start with you. Deep State at it again, huh?
Look, this is all part of an effort to go back to a story we heard earlier this year, which is that Donald J. Trump is insane, mentally ill, and he needs to be wheeled out of there in a straitjacket. The Russian collusion story has collapsed. There's still no Russian collusion despite about a 25-month investigation and hunt for Reds in October of 2016. So now they're going back to this whole notion that Trump is crazy. I saw a press conference he did, I think, on Monday or Tuesday with the president of Poland, President Duda. He conducted himself very well. People were talking in English and in Polish. He handled himself very well. I think that this president's mind is just fine, and the left just has nothing else to talk about. They won't focus on the fact that.
So you think it's improbable that this could have occurred?
I think what this is the so-called paper of record trying to find one more opportunity to raise questions about the president's mental illness. The president's mind is just fine. The economy is performing well. His government is doing well. And they have nothing else to do but bring up this old story that's been discredited both by the president's ability to do his job and also earlier this year by his doctor who came out and said his mind is just fine. I wish they dropped this and focus on the fact this economy is making life better for everybody in this country.
Danielle?
Well, it's interesting, right? I think one of the problems with the sourcing is that the people who are the anonymous sources, of course, are folks who were briefed on the contents of the memoranda and also briefed on what actually happened in the room.
And also the New York Times, right? That's questionable as well.
No, it's not. No, I'm waiting for the fake news, actually. I'm waiting for the fake news retorts. Let's put this in context. What had just happened was two sort of major things. Number one, President Trump had asked for James Comey's loyalty, which is completely out of bounds, number one. Number two, some Russians had come into the Oval Office without anybody else. There was basically concerns about recording equipment. This was about 2 weeks in. The idea that Rosenstein would somehow corral a cabinet that the president had chosen to somehow get a 25th Amendment steam train on the way, it seems a highly
This doesn't mean that Andrew McCabe couldn't have said that. You know, maybe he made it up. Isn't that entirely possible?
That I actually don't believe that he would have memorialized a lie in this memoranda that he knew would eventually probably be turned over to FBI or certainly his.
We're talking about Andrew McCabe.
McCabe. I don't think he would have made it.
Jenna, you're a constitutional attorney. I mean, I'm trying to, I'm finally doing some work and trying to learn this 25th Amendment. Apparently, it came after JFK's death, 1965. Kind of complicated in a way, but ultimately, we keep hearing about it. Why is this being tossed around? Is it really something that can ultimately be used against President Trump?
This really isn't a constitutional question. The reason for the 25th Amendment was to make sure that we have established the succession line. If something were to happen to the President of the United States, we have a procedure in place for it. All that the left is trying to do is use this as a tactic to drive further division between President Trump and the Department of Justice. And so the fact that the New York Times is the one that's alleging this is a political question, and this is something that is not at all really serious in terms of the 25th Amendment. If people understand what that is in context, it's for actual disability or death of the president. It's not for people to speculate about his mental health.
You know, Madison, of course, some are saying that they wouldn't be surprised if there's some truth to this, that it's another example of the deep states, particularly the intelligence community, bracing for President Trump to come in, start to sweep things here. Apparently, McCabe, the way the story went, McCabe maybe thought that it would be Sessions and Kelly who would actually invoke this article, the 25th Amendment, and get the ball rolling.
You know, I think as far as I'm concerned with what has come out today, Rod Rosenstein must go. He has to be fired. I think he's been there for far too long, should have been fired a while ago. But when we look at his response, I think that's what's most interesting about today. He didn't come out and say, I never said about wearing a wire. I never said about the 25th Amendment. All he said in his response was, there is no basis now to invoke the 25th Amendment. I don't trust him, and I think it's very interesting how he responded to that. And let's keep in mind, this is the first time we're hearing about the 25th Amendment since the anonymous op-ed. So who knows, maybe he had something to do with that.
You know, there's going to be a lot of speculation this entire weekend. But again, there was President Trump not happy. He's not happy with Sessions. He hasn't been happy with Rod Rosenstein. And now there will be a lot of people saying this opens the door, DeRoy, for him to take actions that he's wanted to take anyway.
If he believes Rosenstein did this, then yeah, Rosenstein this ought to be his last day at the office. He ought to pack his bags and get out of there. The other thing I wish the president would do, he said he was going to declassify these documents related to the Russiagate story, and apparently he's dialed that back. He wants the Inspector General, the DOJ, to look at these. I think you should just let it rip, let it all hang out. Get these documents out so we can see just how deep the corruption is and not wait a second longer. These documents, I think, should be out this weekend.
I think that's really a problematic idea because not only are this information that's collected by our own intelligence services, but also foreign intelligence services, allies that have sources and methods that they want protected. So the idea that we should just en masse declassify this kind of information, I think, is extremely problematic and a really bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, and there'll be some redaction. I think ultimately something will be released to the general public, and I think it's been politicized enough, Jenna, that we do need to see that. But, you know, circling back to Rosenstein, Jeff Sessions, the relationship that we saw with the intelligence community, people high in the intelligence community who had this vitriolic attitude towards President Trump, candidate Trump, and then President Trump. There's certainly something wrong, and that has to be repaired. I don't think we've repaired that issue yet.
Well, I think that it's the media is advancing this sort of narrative that there is a problem with the anonymous op-ed and now this basically targeted piece against Rosenstein. And regardless of whether or not he saw that, that was 2 weeks allegedly after he started working for the Trump administration. He's gotten to know President Trump a lot better. So if the media would stop attacking
So are you suggesting maybe Madison is right, that maybe he could have done this, and subsequently he's come to know President Trump, and maybe he was overreacting. Maybe it was this sort of a knee-jerk, deep state, hey, we've got to protect our turf because we're under fire kind of thing. And now he's circled around and maybe he's on board. But is there a possibility that this story could be true?
That's certainly possible. And I think with what Rosenstein said and his response to that, it's entirely possible that he did that. But I think what we need to focus on is the fact that this is coming out now today. And this is just, again, a continual attack against President Trump to try to reinvoke the 25th Amendment completely out of context. That's really what the New York Times is trying to do here.
Madison?
I just think it's unacceptable whether or not he knows President Trump better now. I don't think those comments were okay. I don't think that someone in that position of power should be making those type of comments irresponsibly. People refer to him as erratic, his behavior as erratic. I don't think he should have a job. I think, like I said before, he has to go. This is another example of why he has to go. The corruption, the deep state, it's unacceptable. People in this country are sick of it. They voted for President Trump because they wanted to drain the swamp in Washington, and that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, well, we're learning that the swamp is pretty resilient, isn't it?
And it is.
All right, thank you all very much.